earlier this week, Governor Greg Abbott signed Senate Bill 505 into law, which has established a $400 fee to register an electric vehicle in Texas and an additional $200 annual fee every year to be paid. And that's in addition to the annual Texas vehicle registration fee that we already pay. And this is it's a pretty common practice. 32 other states have done it. So it's certainly not unheard of. It makes sense in the fact that we pay for our roads through the tax on gas. And if they're not purchasing gas, we're going to need a way to collect that money. So, I totally understand that and would agree that, we do have to find solutions. And I wouldn't be totally against this solution. However, if you look up at the statistics, it says that Texans spend about $88 per year in gas taxes. So it does seem like they're punishing people for buying electric vehicles. It just doesn't seem it's doing a lot more than just offsetting that. It's actually taking from our fellow Texans. And so I don't really see why that's necessary.
I think we can all agree that we need to have a comprehensive approach to energy, whether it be clean energy, oil and gas, but we all need to come to the table and work on finding solutions that don't hurt the environment, and B, provide that balance of job creation and energy responsibility. So although that I'm glad that you mentioned that this is something that is not totally centric to just Texas, I do agree with you guys' approach that it does seem to be penalizing the electric vehicle purchase owners.
Yeah, we need all kinds of energy and we need to work together, right? 100%.
Yeah, we've had a lot of great guests on this podcast who have been, extremely informative about the energy industry and that need to do it all, right?
Find that balance.
Exactly. Find the balance and take the best from all these different types of energy, and ultimately, make this better for all of the Americans, all the Texans, and lower the cost of energy. Make this just a more efficient and more effective system as a whole.
Yeah, and we'll link those up in the show notes if you want to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. And I do love to see, I don't know if you guys, we are a traveling podcast. Before we got here, I did notice the electric charging vehicle station that we passed to get to our filming location. So I love to see all of these popping up around the state of Texas. But, you find that balance between people who want to purchase, gas cars and then the electric vehicles. Definitely, we have a lot of work to do in this area in the state of Texas.
Yes, Julie, I think the charging stations that's a whole nother controversy for maybe another podcast.
Definitely.
So what else do you have for us today, Julie?
Well, and now I'm going to be talking about one of Dan Patrick, who is our lieutenant governor for the state of Texas. One of his priorities in Senate Bill 23, which is cracking down on gun crime in the state of Texas. And I think it should note that in 2023 alone, Texas has the second most mass shootings. So what was the Senate's approach with this? Well, they were kind of looking at this as a way to after the crime has been committed. That is just their approach for the rapid gun violence in the state of Texas, which is increasing the minimum term for imprisonment, changing the eligibility for community supervision and parole for certain felony offenses, which a firearm is used or exhibited, and then certain consequences or conviction of certain infractions. So it's very broad in general, I would say. I also want to note that Texas, like I said, we are number 2 with 17 mass shootings in 2023 alone. The national average is 4.04. Texas has had 214 gun violence deaths in 2023. The national average is 296.2. Texas has had 3 mass murders in 2023. The national average is 0.42. There have been 13 children aged 0 to 11 killed in 2023 alone. The national average is 1.83. There have been 56 teens aged 12 to 17 killed in Texas in 2023. The national average is 10.52. I think it's also interesting to note that in 2021, the Texas permitless carry law went into effect, making the Texas license to carry program optional. And I think that probably we can tie that back to something to our increasing gun violence crimes in the state of Texas. Obviously, a pro for this is the tougher sentence on crimes. A very obvious con for me would be, it seems like a gun control light situation, not getting to the very root of the problem. And it's always after the crime. So I think it's not before. We're not addressing this before it happens. We're addressing the aftermath. And I think that that's something that we need to definitely highlight on. And it's very lackluster in forms of like anti-gun measures. And I want to also note that close to 80% of Texans support background checks as anti-gun measures, among many other things. And just note the lack of seriousness of the current Texas Leg and their ability to address this very, very staggering issue that impacts the lives of everyday Texans. And the fact that it was left pending in committee May 2nd, and that's not going to advance in this session, just lets you know how unserious they are in resolving this issue that is really impacting our Texans.
Yeah. And another thing I would say is that, mandatory prison time for Texans, unfortunately, a lot of these crimes that are committed are with gun violence, oftentimes involve children that are like doing the shooting. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean for them? Are we going to automatically, throw them in prison without any family court, support and advocacy for them? I don't know. I'm just not for blanket laws like this. I would have to know a little bit more and want to see like how they're going to deal with all of the nuances that would come with it.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting too that I don't recall exactly what bill this was, but there was Republican support for measures to raise the minimum age to purchase an assault weapon to 21, but it fell just short. But yeah, I think that the lack of attention to something 80% of Texans support, I mean, that just shows you, like you said, Julie, that's just the lack of seriousness. I'm pro Second Amendment personally. Texas is when you think of Texas, you think of guns. We're not going to be a state that's leading the way ever on that issue. We're just not. But if 80% of Texans support something like background checks, why is there not a more serious effort towards that?
And why are we not coming to the table?
Well, I think it's classic what the GOP does, and what's here is they always take it back and point at the person, the shooter doing it. It's not a societal issue. And that's just not true. It's a problem we have as a society that we need to address on a bigger level. And what this law does is exactly that. Is exactly the opposite of that.
Right? It's like after the shooting. After the shooting, we need to address this beforehand. And I also would like to note that although, to piggyback on Brian says, I think it goes into this, in America, and especially in Texas, it goes from, we're going to take away your guns to permitless carry. Everybody, you can buy it.
More states are adding
yeah, exactly. So it's like so that doesn't solve anything. And these bills, although that I'm personally glad that the Texas Leg is saying like address this issue, but did they really? They left it pending in a committee. They especially after going after Allen, Texas and Uvalde, Texas. At one point at what point are we going to address the safety of Texans over this kind of political rhetoric
Yeah.
between it's either this, they're going to take away your guns, or open carry.
Right. I mean, there's definitely a middle ground here where you lose no guns and there's just solutions there and that are, again, supported by Texans. I think most Texans want background checks. They want safe storage. They want, the age limits raised. It has nothing to do with losing the Second Amendment. But of course, that's what the media wants to portray, so that it can just continue to separate us instead of coming to the table and doing the work and protecting Texans.
I love that because there are solutions to these problems, and we can come together and work together to find them. So where it's not just one side of that extreme point of view.
Yeah, the all or nothing, right? It's ban guns entirely, or let everybody put guns in schools, give all the teachers guns. It's more guns, right? We don't have to be this all or nothing on. Both of those are completely wrong. We don't need more guns. We probably have too many guns, but we're a gun culture. The gun culture is big in this country. It's big in Texas, and that is a significant portion of this country. Like it or not, that is where we're at. And, we have to work with that. We have to come to the table, come together and talk about reasonable solutions, right?
Yeah. Compromise, definitely. Like the word competition are words that need to get back into the political landscape. Like you said, Brian, this all or nothing situation is not solving the problem. Is not getting to the root cause of the problem. It's not solving the problem. And definitely this bill that died in committee is not solving the problem. And at what point are we going to get, our children shouldn't be collateral damage to just the inability of our current Texas Ledge to come to the table and find a solution to this problem.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Julie.
Brian, I think you have also an interesting take on this this issue as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the other piece to this that you hear a lot, particularly with the GOP in Texas, is it's not the guns, it's mental health. And I think that is absolutely an enormous piece of this whole puzzle. And there's a lot to it. You need to look at everything to solve something like mass shootings, because who in their right mind wants there to be any mass shootings in this country, let alone the amount that we're having at this point, where it's almost every week. It seems like you turn on the TV and there's a mass shooting. So during his tenure, Abbott actually has increased the funding for mental health services in Texas quite a bit. Opponents say that he's posturing and this is not the cause of the problem, and pointing out that talking about mental health is stigmatizing mental health. And it's really about guns. And to me, it's absolutely about both. We need to address, these common sense measures related to guns, but the underlying issue to me is clearly mental health. Honestly, to deny the link between mental illness and mass shootings, I think is just fundamentally unserious. Think about it like this. If there's someone who is in the state of mind where they're willing to buy an AR-15 and go shoot children in a school, are you going to tell me that there's nothing wrong with them mentally, that they don't have something going on, that they probably need something very serious that should be addressed? And that's just, I don't think leaving that out is a serious conversation. It needs to be, and it looks like you're getting ready to say something.
Well, not only that, Brian, but I do want to point out that I think the media gives a lot of attention to mass shootings. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, they do make up a very small portion, like I think less than 1%, mm-hmm. Of gun violence in America. And so when you're talking about mental illness, I think it's important to note that 62% of all firearm deaths in Texas were by suicide. So, or said another way, suicides make up 62% of all firearm deaths in Texas, or at least it did over the past 10 or so years. And so that's a really big number. And those people are being left behind. for whatever reason. And so, mental illness is a very serious issue that I would love to see addressed. And I would love to see the GOP here in Texas and the Democrats, for that matter, everyone, to take it seriously and to really dive into the research and the things that work. And let's take action on it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
100%.
Yeah, definitely. And investing. It's all about investing in Texans when you look at it. Investing and go full circle. And mental health is definitely something that I think often is an afterthought when we think about governing or when we think about the role in government. Brian, I am curious about how the approach to this bill.
Yeah, so there's several bills that have been put to the floor. One, SB26, was passed recently, and ultimately that one is a $15 million, part of this bill is a $15 million innovation grant, which is designed to expand access to mental health services for children and families statewide. So this one, I'll dig into this a little bit because I went pretty deep on this mental health stuff. And I really do like this bill a lot. I think this one does point us in a good direction in terms of addressing this stuff early, as opposed to when this problem, comes to a head, when, you see it in the news and it's a mass shooting. It's like, this is the last symptom that's completely boiled over. And this has been brewing, in the darkness here for any number of years, right? I looked at suicides too, Emily. So, the suicide rates had increased from 2000 to 2018 by 37% in the U.S. This is the U.S., not just Texas. There was a brief decline in 2018 to 2020, and now it's back up to near its peak. So yeah, it's not just the people who are doing these mass shootings. It's people who have depression to schizophrenia. It's all of it. We need to address all of it. And, we don't need to stigmatize people with mental health. We need to be, giving them the resources, right? And giving them access to this care. The bill that I mentioned there, SB26. So one of the key things that experts have identified deficiencies that Texas has specifically is within access to care. So Texas, according to Forbes, ranked as the worst, 50th out of 50 in the U.S. related to mental health care. And how they got that number, it has to do with Texas has the highest percentage of uninsured adults with mental illness, among other things. And the highest percentage of adults with a cognitive disability who could not see a doctor due to the cost. Highest percentage of youth with a major depressive episode that did not receive treatment. So that access to care piece, that's one of the huge problems. And I do think that bill goes a long way in addressing it. And the other one this one's stuck in legislation. It's called SB30. And so this one basically is focusing more on, and so this one's focused a lot more on getting people who are currently in prison or in the legal system, going in prison or in jail, who should be getting care at a mental hospital, psychiatric care. This one proposes spending something along the lines of $2.3 billion to invest in the mental healthcare system here in Texas. And a large part of what this is doing is providing funding to construction of various new mental health hospitals all throughout some of the largest cities in Texas. What I worry about with this bill, though, is that it's just throwing money at the problem. Mm-hmm. And what I want to see is, how are we looking at this? Are we looking at the stats 2-3 years from now, 5-10 years from now, when studies like the one Forbes did has Texas ranked 50th? Are we in the top half at this point? Are these things working? Are these measures that we're taking working to address the problem? And a lot of this is just money that's being given to Health and Human Services. So we'll see what they do with it. A lot of it's still, if this bill does pass, we'll see exactly how that's spent. But it'll be interesting. And I hope in a few years we can actually look at these metrics and look, if we're going to be, a gun state and we're not going to do much on that, then let's be the best in mental health care.
Yeah, and I just want to say that although I think that, we were talking earlier about let's find the roots of the gun violence problem. And I think that this bill, like you said, addresses it similar to the gun violence one. But if you're throwing money at hospitals, it's again, we go back to, I think there's so much overlap. It's like Texas is we're not a one size fits all state. We have West Texas and the Panhandle with the hospital closures. So these towns are not going to be impacted by these mental health bills. And I think that is something that we need. So we're in effect leaving, we're not representing all Texas. We're leaving a certain Texans behind. And I mean, although I applaud, definitely we're not here to criticize the Texas Leg. I just think that out of the thousands of bills that were, and the very few that are making the cut, I think in this instance, you can find many cracks and many layers that we're not reaching all Texans. And as big as mental health is, as even like mass shootings, as everyday gun violence, as Emily mentioned to Tom, we're just putting a Band-Aid on a problem and not really addressing the core.
Yeah, and I think that I really agree with what Brian was saying. As far as I understand, this money, a lot of it's going to be given to nonprofits, which they're already there. They're already doing the work. They're already seeing the people. So hopefully they can help more people. But I'd also like to see it tracked. Like, who are they helping? Is it working? And so that we can continue the fight for our fellow Texans, right?
And Julie, I wanted to say one thing. So you mentioned it's not being spread evenly. That was actually something a lot of experts have pointed out, that the rural areas are the areas that don't have access to these mental health facilities or the professionals. So hopefully that's something specifically that this bill is going to be addressing. And then the last piece I don't think I mentioned here that experts have really pointed out is that, and I hope that the Health and Human Services allocate some of this money towards this, is just addressing this earlier and not when it's this huge, big problem. A lot of experts have pointed out that we should be addressing this at the first sign of, of an episode that someone has, instead of waiting till it gets, completely out of control.
Yeah. And, one other thing I want to mention is that according to the Texas Tribune, they say 98% of Texans in 254 counties were wholly or partially designated by the federal government as mental health professional shortage areas. And I know one of our very first podcasts with Brent Veazey, he talked a lot about that, not in the mental health area, but just in general, that we have a shortage of doctors. And so if any of this money could be used to recruit and to bring those people back, that would be a real win, especially in our rural communities.
Absolutely.
Definitely representation for all Texans is, and not even like 100 years ago people were, individuals were institutionalized for mental health. So, I mean, and that's like, when you think of it in the grand scheme, not that long ago. 100 years is not that long ago. So definitely this is going towards destigmatizing mental health, but is it enough? Time will tell, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Emily, take us home.
So I researched a bill called HB 900, House Bill 900. And it basically, it has passed the House, and it's a bill to ban sexually explicit materials from school libraries. And it's been placed on the intent calendar for today, which is May 21st, which is the day we're recording. So, you guys will see this in the future. We'll get it to you as quick as we can. But the vote will have already happened, possibly. So the vote in the House was 95 yeas and 53 nays, with 12 Democrats joining the yeas. And I think that that's important to point out, that this had, a little bit of bipartisan support. The Equality Texas says the act seeks to to outright censor books with any LGBTQ themes, characters, or content, and requires parental permission to access certain other books. And that's, what they're concerned about. The people that are creating this bill, they're saying that, race and LGBTQ has nothing to do with it. Book bans have been a part of history, in America and throughout the world for, as long as books have been around, right? And they're certainly not new to America. We use them in the McCarthy era and again in the 1980s. But the way the law is written, it says it allows for the removal of patently offensive materials. And that's defined as current community standards of decency. So who's making that? Who's making that rule? Who's saying what current community standards of decency is? That is very broad. This year alone, without this law being passed, we are the leading state with the most banned books. The topic it's been in the news a lot lately, right? It's been going on for quite a while. Pen.org is a great resource if you're curious about what books have already been banned. I couldn't help but look and see a few that were banned recently in Texas or that have been pulled. One of them is Game of Thrones, The Handmaid's Tale, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, which was her debut novel. And it looked at society's obsession with beauty and asking questions about race, class, and gender. Librarians are also afraid that this bill is too vague and will be used to target books that have the LGBTQ characters and books about race. I think it's already happening without this law. I don't think it's a stretch to understand where the librarians are coming from or the advocates from Equality of Texas. They're not making too far of a leap because it's already happening. I don't know. I'm a very avid reader, I would say. I probably read more than the average person. And I think, it's always allowed me to understand and relate to characters that I might not otherwise have been exposed to.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, I've been able to see myself in those pages, which is really important. Everybody deserves representation and to be understood and to be seen. You hear a lot about that, like on TV, representation matters, but I think it matters in our books too. And, in general, books are just a very important part of fabric of the society. I think that books are used as tools, or they should be used as tools to open the door to discussion, which is, that's a way to help us process and flesh out the way we feel about things, the way we think about things. It's just showing you what's possible, right? So at the end of the day, I don't think that this bill is a good idea, obviously. This is focused in schools. And, as a mom, I don't need the state's regulation to tell me what my children can and cannot read. I believe that this should be left up to families to decide and to discuss with their children.
Yeah, it's hard to get behind book banning, being the number one state for book banning. It comes down to censorship. It's never a good idea, in my opinion. And it's saying that people aren't mature enough to read different ideas, even if they're, ideas that are fringe, right? Even if they're not even considering, Game of Thrones is not a fringe book, not a fringe idea. Handmaid's Tale probably was hitting a little too close to home for some of the Texas GOP, I think. Probably. Yeah. That's why they got rid of that one. But now book banning is ridiculous, plain and simple. It's one thing for what, to determine what books are, read in school. That's one thing. I can understand that argument, conversation for a different time. But just this blanket book banning, it's frankly ridiculous. And it's not a distinction I'm particularly proud of in Texas here.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to read them in the classroom, that's one thing, but to pull them from the libraries, that's a completely different thing, and I don't think that that's right.
And I think it's definitely in today's discussion is like the recurring theme, government overreach. And that's really the bottom of this. If something makes you uncomfortable, don't read it. Don't watch it.
Yeah.
That's your right. That's your right. But historically speaking, book bans, banning something, rewriting history, or not allowing different voices to be heard has never worked out for any civilized nation. So I think that this is very concerning.
Yeah. So, and I just want to point out that I think book bans are generally used to control populations and limit understanding of certain subjects. And I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah. And limit understanding of certain subjects and just certain people, different perspectives. What you should be doing, and not to toot my own horn, but sometimes I read books on a political topic or any topic that I don't agree with, just to understand them better and to, if anything, have a better talking point if I'm arguing against something, but also to understand maybe there's something in this perspective that kind of makes sense. We should be reading more of things we disagree with, not less.
Yes. I mean, I don't think it's a secret that the three of us here believe that coming to the table is the way to do things. And how can we come to the table if we haven't read about your side, if we haven't really invested and really had an open mind about that? That's the way we come to solutions, and we have to have the hard conversations. And, having access to understanding others' points of views is the way that is successful.
At the end of the day, what is concerning to me is just this level of Texas-led interference into everyday life, into our communities, into just basically the very fabric of who we are as individuals. And just, we need to regulate. We need to tell you, what you need to do about A, B, C, and D. And I think for me, that's just un-American.
Yeah, they're really overreaching, and it's affecting our families and our children, and it's having real consequences at the end of the day.
Yes.
So, and this is no exception.
No, it's just, every bill that we said for the energies, it's just very, at the end of the day, undemocratic.
Un-American, and it's un-Texan as well, right?
Oh,
you think about Texas, I think freedom is something that most people in Texas value, most Americans value. So we definitely should be doing less in terms of government, trying to dictate across the board, I think, trying to dictate what individual citizens can and can't do.
And look, at this state, sure, it's the GOP that controls everything. In Democratic states or Democratic leaning states, they have their skews, but I would say at the end of the day, it shouldn't be leaning one way or the other. It should be what is best for the majority of people, not a small group of people and what they think and pushing their beliefs and ideas on other people. That is not what government is for, or it's not what government should be for.
No, we are all Texas is a very multifaceted state. We are all individuals. And I think this level of exclusion and this level of not hearing discerning voices is something that for me is extremely alarming. And I really, one of the main reasons why I, volunteered for the Forward Party.
Yeah, I'd say it's terrifying.
It is. And to your point, Emily, too, there's so much of this get even stuff going on of just jamming things down people's throats. Mm-hmm. This, as I was going through a lot of these bills, it seems like so much of what's being put to the floor, and this is beyond just Texas, this is across the aisle as well. The left does this as well. It's just forcing your perspective, more and more and more of this, just jamming it down people's throats. And like the EV bill that you talked about, a part of me looks at that and says that's, Biden just gave a tax credit or expanded, the tax credits and incentives for people to invest in EVs or, solar. This, I can't help but think, I don't have proof, but it seems like maybe here's a little slap on the wrist for doing that, and we're going to make it a little harder for you to get those benefits.
Sure.
Yeah, and so if we're looking at these polarizing issues like book bans, I mean, at the end of the day, what are they doing? Like, so what are we not seeing? And I think a lot of these bills discussed today, how broad they are, and how like they're open to so much interpretation. Like even the book bill, from what can be regulated in the city of Dallas, which is where we are right now. Why?
You touched on a really important point, Julie, is that, these books that are being banned, they're not necessarily going to have a list where you can go look and see what's been banned. And so what knowledge are we really going to be losing is you might never know the unintended consequences of that.
Exactly. And, as you've seen historically in history, this kind of behavior has never really led to good things.
Yes.
So,
for sure.
I mean, and so when I say that, I'm concerned. I'm definitely concerned, and I'm definitely would like a list of all these banned books so I can definitely add them to my home library. It's worth reading.
Yes. And with that, Julie, do you want to give us a closeout?
Yes, I do. I just want to take this time to thank all of our listeners and all of our YouTube audience viewers. This has been a labor of love for all three of us. We started in September with this, on September 29th with this, let's start a podcast. None of us having that skill set, but we're just like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And, we are here, 9 months later, and
we're figuring it out.
We are figuring it out as we go. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for all your tips, suggestions, and for all your, well wishes and good thoughts. We really appreciate this. We really appreciate you being in this journey with us, and we're so excited for what the future brings. Definitely moving forward.
Well, this has been the Texas Forward podcast. Thank you again, everybody listening at home. Julie, I couldn't have said it better myself. So everything you just said, I agree with. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Bye.